Hello and welcome to the Strong Suit Podcast, where we focus on the people part of your business. Every single episode, I feature a world-class leader on talent and recruiting so that you can build a company filled with rock stars. I am so pumped to speak with my guest today, Mark Switaj. Now, let me tell you a bit about Mark and his business. Mark's based in Philadelphia, awesome town, and he is the leader of an awesome company called RoundTrip. RoundTrip is a single touch point for non-emergency patient transportation. So as he's going to describe, they work with a ton of phenomenal institutions to handle all their patient transportation, both on demand and scheduled, wheelchair, stretchers, helicopters, jet planes, the whole thing. It's really phenomenal. And it does a few things. It obviously makes transportation easy for the riders, but it also is a really important efficiency solution for the institutions, right? So they can provide better clinical care. So I think it's a great model. And we're going to talk about the people part of RoundTrip over the next 15, 20 minutes with Mark. How are you, Mark?
Great. I'm doing great.
It is awesome to have you on the show. So many of our listeners will identify with this, right? Because we've got aging parents, or perhaps we've used a similar type of service. So why don't we just spend the first 60 seconds on what the business is all about? And then we'll kind of dive into the people part of it.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for that introduction. Jet planes, huh?
So one day, right?
One day. We're solving a real world problem, and that's really what motivates me every single day. I come from the medical transportation space. I worked for the nation's largest medical transportation company. So I saw firsthand a lot of the opportunities to improve this space. And of course, I have family members that have obviously interfaced or interact with the experience of ordering rides. Mm-hmm. So, all right. So what is RoundTrip? Like you mentioned, we're the single touch point for ride delivery for patients that need to get to or from a healthcare appointment. While it sounds easy and it just rolls off my tongue, it's a pretty complicated space. And sadly, it's pretty broken. 10,000 people every single day miss or delay care because of transportation issues. 1 out of every 5 healthcare appointments is missed or delayed because of a transportation problem.
Wow.
It makes no sense to me. And, if you follow that down the line, right, people that are not getting to their healthcare appointments, they're going to get sicker. They're going to turn into maybe an ER visit. They're going to give up on the system and on their own health. And that's a real problem.
And you're referring specifically to non-emergency. Is that right?
That's right. So yeah, where our world begins and ends is non-emergency medical transportation. So we don't really get into the 911 space where folks would call 911 to get an emergency vehicle.
Yeah.
We do rides for folks that are going to or from a healthcare appointment in a non-emergency way.
Got it. Okay, beautiful. So now we understand the business, and I know you work with great institutions like Mount Sinai and Cooper MD Anderson. So these are first class. These are not schlocky outfits. So clearly you're building something that delivers value. I want to rewind the clock and kind of understand a little about the backstory. I know from your background in the pre-interview that you've spent a good chunk of your career in this field. Tell us kind of how you got your personal journey, how you got to where you are today running this venture-funded company.
Yeah, so I love this space. I don't know, like people talk all the time about you have to be passionate about what you do. I love this space. It's so interesting. It's complicated. It's a little bit like rough on the edges, undefined. So I come from the medical transportation space. Like I said, I actually started out working on an ambulance. So one of my first jobs, I started out volunteering, was on an ambulance. So wow. Right from the get-go, I was doing it for nothing, and I was responding in the emergency segment. I was doing 911 responses for people, fell down that needed help or going to an ER.
Yep.
And then I found out that you could do that same thing but get paid for it. So one of my first jobs was working as a paid EMT.
Right.
And then mainly because I was just so passionate about this space, I turned that passion into a career. And like I said, wound up working for a very large, very great medical transportation company that really helped me foster an understanding of the business side of this industry. And then went to business school, and then returned back into healthcare doing physician practice management, where I saw really how the healthcare providers interface with transportation.
It's really the trifecta you're describing, because you had it in your blood, no pun intended. You're passionate about it. you spent time in the field, so you saw some of the issues firsthand. And then it sounds like you worked at an existing business to kind of deepen your knowledge about some of the issues. So you saw this thing from a bunch of angles.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Great. So going back in time, you decided to start the company. How did you start to think about? You're up to how many employees now?
We have 24 FTEs.
Okay. So how did you start to think about those first few? The first 3 or 5. How did you think about the DNA or characteristics, other than competencies and skills that they might need to bring to the venture?
Yeah, so great point. That first hire is so crucial, right? So I know what I know and I know what I don't know. And obviously the hindsight is always 2020, right? It's much easier to talk about this now than relive the emotions of that time. And it was very emotional.
I'm sure.
I remember when I was trying to start RoundTrip, I knew that I wanted to solve a problem about patient transportation, but I knew I did not know product or tech. And I spent a lot of time trying to understand who I could interface with to be my technical co-founder. And I went to a lot of meetup groups and just was down on my luck one day after trying so hard to find somebody. And I called a friend of mine from business school and I said to him, I just can't find my co-founder. And as everybody says, sometimes there's a little bit of luck in business. He said, give me 20 minutes. And he called his network, his friends, and lo and behold, Ankit, our CTO and my co-founder, called me and said, I'm in. Tell me about what you're trying to do.
Wow.
And from there, then we built out our team. Angela helped us understanding the finance side of this. So many people form a great idea, but don't have a sound company to back it up. Angela is the silent backbone of our company, making sure that all of our I's are dotted and T's are crossed.
So this was really luck. It's not like you went out on some big recruiting process and interviewed a slew of candidates. You got lucky.
It was a little bit of luck. It was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. A little bit of luck.
Great. Awesome. And it's worked out, obviously. And that was how long ago?
That was back in 2016.
Okay. So coming up on 2 years. So what, now that you guys are at 24, 25 people, have you thought about and codified the DNA of the organization? I don't mean that list of long values on the front wall, but are there 2 or 3 essential characteristics that you look for in every single hire, regardless of position?
Absolutely. Yes. So the first thing is I don't want people like me. Half the time I can't stand me. So I definitely don't want more people like me.
Yeah.
So people talk all the time about diversity in tech, diversity in the workforce. I think we truly embody that. The more people that are not like me or ourselves, the better off we will be. As I like to say, diversity mitigates risk. And that's how we constantly think about our organization. That comes from many different angles, walks of life. And if you were to look at our team and listen to our team, more importantly, you would see that we are also very different. And that's what makes us beautiful.
And so what is the kind of the common thread? If I met 4 or 5 of the team, regardless of position, what would I come away saying, wow, these folks are all blank?
Passionate and embody a can-do attitude.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, understanding this space is not very difficult, but we have to remember that we are actually improving the lives of patients every single day. One of the things that we do in our company is everybody, as part of our culture, is required, quote unquote, to do a ride along. So we have relationships with medical transportation companies. Every person on our team has done a ride along with a transportation company so that they can experience firsthand what a patient has to go through.
Yeah. Where did you learn to hire people? I mean, you didn't have a traditional background for learning how to recruit great people with this consistent DNA, not only of passion, but of, I'm guessing, empathy. Did you read a book? Did you have a mentor?
Yeah, I've had several mentors, several books, certainly learned it in business school, but even from a young age, I was a young manager. So at a young age, probably around 24, I think I became a manager and began to realize what are some of the qualities that we need in an organization And it all starts with people. As you become more mature in your career and rise up the ranks of an organization, your primary focus is culture and people. And that's what I think about every single day. My job as a servant leader, I subscribe to servant leadership.
Yeah.
Quint Studer has a great book on this, servant leadership.
It's a phenomenal book. And it's a pretty simple concept. Unfortunately, most people don't do it.
Yeah, that's right. Serve the people that are really doing the job.
Right. Pretty novel thought, right? What is the most unique part of the recruiting process? I'm sure you do, you source for candidates and you interview, but is there anything that's really unique as part of the process that I would go through if I was a candidate?
Yes. So we follow a pretty regimented three-pronged approach to onboarding or recruiting somebody to our organization. So let's say we've identified you as an interest and you're interested in our organization. We bring you in. There's three parts to every interview, and I love talking about this. So we don't just do the resume review, or as many call it, the behavioral component of an interview. Tell me about yourself. After we do that, we have everybody go through a case study. We put a business problem in front of an individual, call it a pop quiz, and they have 10 minutes to give us an answer. It's amazing what you can learn about an individual through a pop quiz. And then the final component that we do is open-ended, naturally defined and specifically defined this way. The last 5 minutes, 10 minutes of the interview is open. Use that time to give us a presentation on any topic of your choosing. That is the only direction we give. And it's fascinating.
Do they know that in advance or no?
They do. The second part, they don't. The third part, they do. And we've had people tell us how to bake a cake. We've had people tell us their life story. I mean, it's fascinating.
Got it. Tell me, you mentioned this interesting thing about a test or a quiz. What was that? You kind of blew by that. What was that?
Yeah. So you can't really garner everything from frankly walking through somebody's resume just because they were, let's say a CFO or a director of operations or did product may not necessarily unveil that they know how to do what it is that you need them to do in their respective roles. So we would put a typed out case study in front of that individual and give them 10 minutes alone to work on it. We come back into the room and we see how they would respond. Got it.
So essentially a test drive other than different than an interview.
That's right.
Got it. And for listeners that don't do that, which 90% of companies don't, what have you learned in that process or in that phase of the process that you haven't taken away in the traditional interviews that you do before that step?
So first is we get a cultural fit, right? How do you think through problems? And oftentimes the answer in that case study is, I need to rely on my coworkers to help me get to the right answer. I love when people give an answer that is I-centric and not we-centric. When I hear I would do this, I would do that, I would do this, I'm starting to think you're not going to fit in here because no decision is really ever made alone in a business forum, that you're going to be relying on your coworkers. When do you reach out for help? I often infuse a question that requires that individual to lean on somebody else for the answer.
Got it. Totally get it. So now you're at 24 people. You've built a team. You're on your way. One of the biggest concerns that I hear about these days in this crazy job market that we're in is the revolving door. What are some of the steps that can be taken to eliminate that or at least reduce that in a company when you think about either people that you've lost that you didn't want to or that you worry about losing, et cetera?
Yeah, and there's all sorts of guidance on this, right? People fire an employee fires an employee, right? There's so many schools of thought on this. I said this to one of my colleagues yesterday or earlier this week. I said, if an employee quits, it's almost harder for me that an employee quits over losing an account. I'd rather lose an account than lose an employee. And I think she couldn't believe that I said that. And I said, because I feel like with an employee, we failed. Somehow we failed, and you thought that there was a greater opportunity outside these four walls, and I didn't know about it, and I didn't nurture it. So I take that as a harder failure.
What could you have done in hindsight to prevent that as you think about people that perhaps have left over the couple of years? Was there a common theme, a common pattern, especially other than just pay them more money?
Yeah, so money's a terrible motivator, right? So we know that money isn't a solution, and no company has enough money to pay their employees what they want to pay them. So how do we keep, I think really the answer is culture, and culture is defined differently for every organization. But how do we keep people intellectually stimulated, energized, and interested in what it is that we're doing? I always like being a step ahead of our employees in thought. How are we thinking about this business challenge? What if the business shifts that way? How will we address it? And I love, frankly, when employees are doing that to me. But Mark, did you consider folks that are unable to use technology? How would they be able to order a ride?
Right.
Thought of that creative mold is what created that fosters our organization.
So if you can continue to foster that sense of challenge for people, even when you can't afford to pay them exactly what they wish they were paid, you're more likely to retain them, essentially.
That's right. And I will say, sometimes you experience more in life when you don't go the expensive route.
Mm-hmm.
From my prior life, I don't remember all the fancy conferences and hotels that I stayed in, but I can tell you each of the time that our employees came together and we did a potluck and we barbecued together, or we assembled a desk together. Those moments are much more memorable and team building in my recollection than those expensive dinners.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think that culture and retention are about ping pong tables and beer bashes and fancy stuff and fancy offices. It's really the people next to you.
Right.
So I know that you raised a round of funding recently. I don't know if you're at liberty to talk about that, but you raised some significant money from great venture capital firms and strategics. A lot of times companies, intend to upgrade or expand their team. Is that the case for RoundTrip at this point?
That's right. So we made an announcement a few months ago that we closed on $1.9 million seed capital round, which is incredibly exciting for us. And that announcement really was the close of that round. We actually had brought that money in several months prior, and that had allowed us to scale the company into what is today 24 FTEs. And frankly, continue to build the feature set that our clients have asked of our product and of our organization, scale into new markets, scale in different use cases. And I think we're just at the beginning. There is such a hunger for the business problem or solution to the business problem that we're addressing that I think we're going to see our company continue to scale and grow far beyond the now 15 states where we're operating regularly.
Got it. You're in 15 states, you said?
Yeah.
And the aspiration is to be national, or do you envision this as more of a regional play?
Well, I don't even know if national is the end. Medical transportation, patient transportation is an issue in many, many markets, in Europe in particular, India. So I don't know if just domestic is where we will end.
Are there different regulations locally by state, or not so much?
Oh, by county, by state, for sure, at least in the United States. And many have said and argued that going international with single payer models may actually even prove a more beneficial market for us.
Got it. I understand. Very good. It's so hard now to find great candidates. Where are you finding your best candidates these days?
Yeah, great question. So I can actually point to one area if I could be so bold. So one of the individuals that we hired into our team came from an organization called VFA, which is Venture for America. Mm-hmm. And I have turned into a raving fan for this organization. I kind of liken them to like Teach for America, but for folks that are looking to go into the startup space, so venture space. We've recruited somebody full-time and are actively looking for more folks out of that program, just absolutely high caliber folks coming out of there. We use other tools like Workable, and frankly, we do a lot of word of mouth referrals into our organization. I don't even think I would need to rely heavily on the traditional marketing channels. Word of mouth has been carrying us pretty well.
Do you have an employee referral program? I mean, a specific one?
We don't compensate based on referrals yet. I think as our company is growing and scaling, in order to get the best talent in the door, as timely as possible, we may adopt that type of model, but we haven't built one yet.
Got it. If you could, last question, Mark, if you could kind of go back to the beginning of the venture a couple of years ago and do anything differently with regard to the people part of the business, not marketing or the product, but really the people part, hiring different people, faster, slower, whatever, what comes to mind that would have made a difference in accelerating the pace of the business?
I wish I had listened to a bit of guidance that somebody had given to me later on. Wish I had heard it earlier on, which is you're going to constantly get advice that conflicts with other advice, right? And somebody said to me once, I only listen to advice when I hear it 3 times. When I hear it from 3 disparate sources, then I'm listening to it. I think I started to bend and weave based on the guidance of the moment. And I think in hindsight, I wish I had, frankly, listened to what I believed was right and the guidance that I had been hearing consistently.
So a little less, I don't want to say wishy-washy, but a little bit more fortitude and confidence in your convictions before you just listen to the advice you were given, which as an entrepreneur, you get so much friggin' advice. It's ridiculous.
That's exactly right.
Right. From at home and at work and from your investors and the board meetings and your employees. It seems like it never ends, right?
That's right.
Great. Well, Mark, congratulations on building what sounds like not just a very profitable venture, but a very important one, obviously, for all of us as the population ages. How can people learn more about RoundTrip or get in touch with you?
Sure. Yep. So www.rideroundtrip.com. Rideroundtrip.com.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for making the time today.
Great. Thank you.